Howdy folks, this is Wandering Mind 25. On my last video I showed you how to install the Xbox driver, configure it so that and when you boot up the Pi, that it installs automatically and you're able to at least get an interface with your controller and the Pi itself. This next step, we need to configure it so it actually will work for your ROMs and your emulators and such. Last video I did not show you how to shut down the Pi safely, which is very important. What you need to do is type in sudo sudo shutdown. If you want to just restart it, do -R and then type the word now. If I click this, it'll actually restart the Pi. You do this so that all those changes you just made will take effect, such as the driver is loading automatically. And the next step will be to configure each controller so we know when you press the A button, or the Pi knows when you press the A button what it means and how to translate it into the emulator. So what you'll need to do is run this command from the main window. So let me delete this. So we want to do, had something else from the last video in there. So we want to do copy and paste this link right here, which is CD squiggly line RetroPi emulator RetroArch tools. So basically we're just changing the directory to that location. And now you want to run each one of these commands depending on how many controllers you have. I had 2 controllers, so I ran the command twice, or at least I ran this one and then I ran the one below it. Each time you run this command, it will create a file, and that file will include what happens when you press a button, when it should be, when you're pressing the A button, what code it got, so it knows what button A stands for, B stands for, and such. It will know exactly how many buttons there are. I don't know if that's the set amount that it assumes, or is it just it knew that I'm using a Xbox controller. So every single button that the Xbox is capable of using, with the exception of the little X button in the center that blinks and whatnot, you'll press every single button. So that includes the joystick pads. You have to press those down. Those would be one of the both of those buttons are used as well. So what will happen once you paste that command in, it'll say, okay, make sure that the controller is awake, so press a button or 2 on it and then press enter. When you press enter, from that point forward, it'll ask you questions like, okay, press the up button. You press the up button on the controller, and then it'll say, okay, now down, okay, left, okay, right, and then it'll run through X, Y, A, B, and then your left and right triggers and your left and right bumpers and and such. Once you've completed that, it'll say, okay, I'm done, and then you'll go to the next line, which would be this guy right here. You'll notice that these lines are slightly different. One says P1, this one says P2, this says joystick 0, this says joystick 1. The breakdown, they explain it right here, what it means. Now once you've done that for all your controllers, in my case I only did it twice, 1 line per controller, you run this command, the sudo cats p star.config. Just copy this entire line. What this will do, when you copy and paste that line into your terminal, all the contents of the configurations in the files that it created here will all be put together in one file, and that will be located in the RetroPi config all RetroArch config. And what this is, this will be the master configuration for all your controller settings, and that will be used for all your emulators. Now, this would be the main one. However, each emulator can have its own custom changes. So, for instance, if this configuration doesn't really play so nice with like an NES controller type, or or a Super NES, or whatever other emulator you have, you can customize it. So, just to show you what it looks like, we'll go to that directory. So, if I do a CD, it'll back me all the way back to the Pi directory. And then we can do CD space, and I'll just cut just part of this command here, which is squiggly line RetroPi config all RetroArch config. Paste that, hit enter. Oh, I forgot the most important part. I need to make it just to the all directory because I'm only going to the directory, not to the file. Okay, so now I'm at the directory. Now I can do a sudo nano, just like we did on the last video. So I'm running the command edit this file, which is RetroArch. You can start to type the command, you press the tab key and it'll fill it in for you. So hit enter, and now this is the entire file when you combine the two controllers together. I also have my keyboard in here as well. So input it would be, for instance, the joypad index 0, up, down, left, right, it equals those buttons. But if I go all the way down to this right here, player 1 joypad index 0 with the quotations, this would be player 1 on my Xbox controller. And so when you ran that that script that created those config files, it basically connected what the B button is equals 1, what the Y button equals 3, and so forth. And then you did the second controller. I did the second controller, and it did the same thing. Now we're going to go one step further, and this part I would consider it very necessary. You need, once you're in the ROM, you need to be able to get back out, and you don't want to shut down your emulation station, because any game save that you would have saved doesn't actually commit to your SD card until you shut down the RetroArch emulation station. So what you need to do is set up a hotkey and then an actual button that does exit emulator. So what you'll do is, in my case, I have 8 and 9. 8 would be the select button on my player 1 controller, and 9 will be the start button on my player 1 controller. It doesn't actually say player 1 in here, but it doesn't work for player 2 for whatever reason. So how I found out what 8 and 9 is, you just go through this list, and as you can see, there you go. The start button is 9 and the select button is 8. So that's how I found out what buttons or what numbers to actually put in that place. So once I'm in the ROM, I'm playing my game, I'm like, okay, save my file, save my game, now I need to get out. So I'll just hit the start and select keys, select first, then start, and then I'll exit out of the ROM. And at that point, you need to shut down the emulation station if you want to commit your game save. I can show you that at a further video, but the quick rundown would be, you hit your menu button, whatever you set that up to be, and then you can scroll down to shut down or exit or something of that nature. So at this point, we'll exit out, and we'll start the configuration that on the customized emulators. For instance, as I was talking about how this was just our master, now we want to configure for the individual emulators. So we need to back out really only one directory, but I don't remember, or I don't know how to back out just one. So we want to do CD let's try the squiggly line, RetroPi, oh, / RetroPi, / config, and then dir. Okay, so right now it's listing all the emulators that I have installed, or at least directories for emulators. So I've configured already the Super NES and NES at this point. So let's go to the NES directory and do a dir, and we only have one file, which is the RetroArch config. So I'll do a sudo nano RetroArch and hit enter. Now on here, being the NES controller only has A and B buttons, select, start, up, down, left, right. That's the only buttons that it has. So I only need to change a few buttons because all the other ones aren't going to make any difference. So I felt it was a lot easier rather than on the Xbox controller where you have A on the bottom and B on the right above it. That didn't feel right when I'm playing a game. I like to be able to have both buttons underneath my thumb when I'm playing. So I made the A button on the controller B in the NES emulator, and I made the X button the A button. So so that I didn't have two buttons doing the same thing, I just basically switched around the X key and the B key to do what the other did, and I did that for both controllers. So this way the A and B buttons are configured in the manner that's, to me, is closer to the NES controller's setup. I did the same thing with the NES, Super NES system as well. So I'm going to exit out of this, and I will do the same thing I just did a moment ago, where I back out and then go forward again. So cd squiggly line / RetroPi / config, and then I'll do cd Super NES because I already know that's what the directory is going to be. And then we also know that that file name is going to be sudo nano RetroPi or RetroArch config. Now this one's a little bit more excessive because of the fact that you have a lot more buttons on a Super NES controller than you would a NES controller. This one I swapped the buttons around so it closely match a NES controller. So I don't have the controller in front of me, so I don't remember exactly what it is, but I think A was in the top right and B was in the bottom, and then you had your X and Y in some manner. Well, either way, it didn't match an Xbox, so I switched it around and I did the same thing for both controller A and controller B. Now you'll also notice that I don't have anything in here to, for instance, to exit the ROM. Well, only the changes that you actually have in here are changed from the master config. So if I only had two lines in here saying I want button A to do button B's work, all the other configs will follow that, with the exception of that one change. So that's pretty much it for customizing it each emulator. So we will continue on. I'm going to stop the video here, and I'll start the next one up with updating the emulators and then eventually even adding the ROMs. So until then, I'll see you next time. Bye.